Though action films have been around since the 1900s, they really only began to gain in popularity in 1920 and onward. In fact, action films are the only film genre that hasn't seen a decrease or fluctuation in popularity since they began. Studios also produce more action films than they ever have. In the 1930s, action only made up 4% of the top films of that decade, while in the present day they encompass over 34% of films thus far. Though most historians agree that The Great Train Robbery of 1904 was the first action film, the genre didn't really take off until the swashbuckling films of the 1920s and 30s. These films had a clear-cut plot with obvious black and white characters. The characters were either really good people or really bad. As well, music was an important part of these films. Many times the stories were novel adaptations like Captain Blood or The Three Musketeers. Films like this worked especially well in the silent era. By the 1940s and 50s, movies had evolved. Audiences were now ready for more complex storytelling. America had become hugely powerful after the World Wars, asserting its dominance over half the planet. This led to the rise of the war action film. Movies like Sands of Hiroshima told the story of the bravery of our boys during World War II. Paths of Glory, which was released in 1957, showed in depth the trench fighting of World War I. As the Cold War brewed and warfare changed, audiences grew tired of combat stories, and espionage became the common trend in action flicks. In the beginning of the 1960s, many of the restrictions of what could and couldn't be in films were gone. Audiences wanted to see exciting and suspenseful films. Without these moral guidelines, filmmakers had the freedom to create more risque movies. This, combined with Cold War fears that anyone you know could be hiding something or working for another country's government, led to the spy action film. Often these films had exotic locations, tongue-in-cheek humor and dialogue, nifty gadgets and ingenious toys to combat evildoers, fast action and stunts, and gorgeous scantily clad women. The most notable spy film from this time period was, of course, the James Bond series, with films like Dr. No and Goldfinger. But there was also more serious films which dealt with the realities of the espionage world, like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. In the 1970s, American people had once again found themselves at war. This led to a resurgence of the war action film. Having been at war for 15 years by the time the 70s came around, there was plenty of stories to share. Movies like The Deer Hunter or Apocalypse Now showcased the horrors of war in an action-packed, star-studded film that would draw in audiences. The 1980s brought back the extravagance of early Hollywood, but in a summer blockbuster form, with movies like The Terminator, RoboCop, and Rambo. After decades of pushing for gender equality, women had more power than ever before. By 1985, half of college graduates were women. In response to this, the action genre, which is typically targeted at a young male audience, became hyper-masculine. Emphasis was put on the main characters' physical strengths, aggression, and sexuality. As technology starts to become more accessible in the 1990s, the action film changes and becomes what we know it to be today. Thanks to computers, special effects, which make up a huge part of any action movie, can now be done safely by a special effects artist. Computer-generated effects, or CGI, are not only safer, but substantially more affordable. This being said, it has not completely had a positive effect on these films. In the article, The Evolution of the Action Film, Mick LaSalle suggests that the action film is changing, but not evolving. Just compare Raiders of the Lost Ark with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The former is still a movie about people. In the latter, the human element is suppressed in favor of stringing together a series of spectacular action sequences. To try to top the blockbusters of the 1980s would be possible with the new technology, but not without losing something: the story. Instead of the special effects enhancing the story, most movies in the 90s followed a simple plot, put into place to showcase special effects. This issue just continues to snowball into the 2000s to the present day. Looking to the future, we hope that we can get out of this artistic dead end. We can move away from movies like The Avengers Age of Ultron and more towards movies like Ex Machina, where the effects were used to craft a beautiful story.